Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 85 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. Looking forward to talking to Chris Feeney. Chris, it's been a couple weeks. How you been?
Been good. Good. Kind of got through the end of summer there, Labor Day holiday, and picked steam right up as September hit. Of
Hmm.
course, college football takes off, so that's always exciting. Um, the weather begins to cool. We live in the Carolinas, as you know. It's a great time of year to be outdoors before it gets a little bit colder.
Yeah.
So
I mean, don't let the secret out. I think the secret's already out. For the most part, it doesn't get that cold.
yeah, we don't need everybody moving here. I
Yeah,
got
don't come. No, we want you to come. Just don't move to my town or my neighborhood. No, I'm just kidding. It's correct. All right. So today is September 26, 2023. Here comes my XenTegra commercial. I've started doing this at the beginning of every podcast. If you are working with a IGEL or an IGEL partner or both, and they're not bringing real value add to the equation and helping you understand how these solutions work by doing things like podcasts, webinars, lunch and learns, just coming to see you and having open conversations around how the "it ain't Windows" message should be landing at your organization, reach out to me on LinkedIn, Andy Whiteside, and let's talk about this. I mean, we do these podcasts because we love to do it, but at the same time, it's a business, and there are so many people out there struggling with their end user compute world. We want to help. We can make a really good business just helping people. It's awesome. It really is. Chris, you brought a blog today called "Digital Thinking: Work Leaner and Smarter at the Endpoint." I think what you just said, or what Simon Townsend, who wrote this blog, was saying, it ain't Windows. Don't use Windows. Work smarter, work leaner, work more secure at the endpoint. Why did you bring this particular blog?
Well, just another way of re-emphasizing, obviously, the key value prop that IGEL brings to a lot of organizations. And it kind of goes with our theme of disrupt EUC, just the way of thinking, of normally just replacing something every, few years, and just how much of that, just if you add it all up, I mean, just trillions probably at this point of money spent where things maybe shouldn't have been taken down that path. And IGEL's value prop is we can extend the life of a lot of devices that are currently in use, and then just with a focus on the software, just bringing a new way of thinking, and with a lot of stuff moving to cloud-based delivered, either natively cloud or through a virtual desktop mechanism from like a Windows OS. You don't need continue to run the same old thing on the endpoint that you've had for years and years and years. And so this is just more highlighting a study that was done that we'll kind of talk a little bit about just wasted IT spending
Yeah.
when you add it all up.
Wasted spending, vulnerability, attack vector increasing, landfill, e-waste. I'm moving, and I've gone to the landfill twice in the last 2 days, and it is painful for me to have to take stuff and get rid of it that we had to have at one point, or in some cases we didn't have to have.
Yeah.
We chose to have it, and nobody made you buy that. Let's get smarter about it. And what you're really saying here is let's break the cycle of buying new computers when we don't need them, and we could do it much more efficiently. All right, so the first section after the intro is waste not your software spend. What is Simon covering there?
Yeah, he's kind of focusing really on, if you look at your initial software investment, starting with, what does you walk up to a device? What does the user need to get to? I like to look at it from that perspective. Start there. And if they can do their job, using the resources coming from on-prem or remote location, in the sense of delivered, from a browser or a data center somewhere out there in the world, and the user experience doesn't suffer. I mean, do they really need to have that on the endpoint in many cases, depending on their job? And so, starting with there and just thinking, hey, what's the art of the possible? If you have Linux on that endpoint, preferably IGEL Linux, what capabilities exist that we can deliver in today's world, where much of what you need to do to work and do your job can be delivered virtually or through just a browser. We do this
Chris,
all
for
the
the
time.
most part,
Yeah.
you're going to connect to something else anyway. You're going to connect to a server, a cloud, or something anyway. Put as
Yeah.
much as you can there. Reduce your attack vector. Anyway, we're gonna talk about that probably a million times.
Yeah.
Now there are use cases. So I met with someone last week, and the conversation was about, they said everybody should replace every Windows device in their organization. Like, no, that's not what we're trying to say. But we're trying to say there's a percentage. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 90%. Could be a smarter, leaner solution that's going to connect to stuff that's more secure and more scalable anyway. That's it's not an all or nothing kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I was thinking about this. I mean, just if you take it just what's installed on the device, just bear alone with that. I've got, many devices where if it's running Windows versus IGEL, I mean, one of the most immediate things that you can see is that the battery life is extended because if your OS is not constantly taxing the hardware just to run, for example, or whatever, that can extend even further, elongate the ability to use that device, especially if you need it to be unplugged because of whatever reason. That's just a very simple example of having just a 90% reduction in terms of the what's on there, what's needed to do the work, to use that resource, and how much more life you can get out of it. I've done it before where I've literally worked all day on battery from an LG Gram, running my virtual desktop, and it on a Wi-Fi or even my hotspot. I was not experiencing. I could do these calls, these Zoom calls. I could do Teams calls. The user experience did not suffer one bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, Chris, the next section says leaning up the hardware conversation or conservation. Leaning up the hardware conservation. What's Simon covered here?
He's talking about basically removing applications that would normally be installed locally and moving them cloud. It actually, what are the benefits there? From an IT perspective, you know, you don't need as much hardware on the endpoint to be able to run that application. The cloud, having that back-end infrastructure, can actually process and more, consume less, can actually faster user experience. We've seen this with applications where they were typically, fat type of OSs installed locally on devices, but as the vendor moved and updated their product, they leveraged the power of the cloud, and now you just need a lightweight, maybe client perhaps, or even just a browser in many cases. But also, what does that also open up with these additional infrastructures? Hardware agnostics. We've seen the ability for applications to be supported across multiple types of platforms. And the user experience, generally speaking, would be roughly the same because it's the same type. If it's accessing a browser, take Office.com, for example. I mean, I'm going to just guess here, throw a number. 90% of the feature functionality that you would need to run those Office applications versus the locally installed version of it is there, and it's functional. You can do it. You might need something that the browser necessarily doesn't have, but that's getting smaller and smaller over the course of time. And so when you look at from the application and the ability to deliver, now you look at, okay, what hardware out there can I use to bring that experience? And that's where IGEL can come in. And obviously, we've talked about this many times over. If you don't know that IGEL can convert their devices and save them from going to the landfill, I mean, that's a huge step up from, and I would say just in the last week alone, in the meetings I've had, that's 95% of the conversation that's happening. Not that,
Which
they're not
part,
looking
Chris?
at new ones.
Which part?
Again, always starting with what do you have today?
Mhm.
Can you leverage that device or devices or can you start there to get to deliver the user experience you're trying to take them to?
Yeah.
Sometimes the answer is a yes. Sometimes it's not because it's just older, and they're going to need to look at something else, and that obviously lines up with our IGEL Ready program and a lot of the options that exist there in terms of form factors.
Chris,
So
let me walk you through this from a numbers perspective. What
yeah,
percentage at the average company? What percentage of users have a 3-year-old or less laptop at the average company? Just throw out just spitball a number.
I'm going to go with 85%.
85%. So if it's 85%, and I were to ask the following question, what percentage of users at an average customer actually travel for work? Like actually travel for work? What do you think the number is?
I'm going to drop it probably 40,
It's
35, 40% maybe.
it's 10, 15, 20, 30, 40. So why do they need a high-powered laptop to do that if they don't actually travel? I mean, look, I get on planes every week. I run podcasts from, the subway station, whatever. I need a laptop. I need a full-blown Windows or Mac laptop in most cases. But a lot of people don't travel nearly like that. But yet they have a $2,000, $1,500 laptop that they're given a new one every 3 years. I don't quite understand the default logic in that.
I think it's first of all, it's just probably not thinking about that um, from that type of perspective. Like, let's pull back and just think about what do these folks actually need to use to do their job, and I'm going to provide you a company asset. Does that also allow us to enable a BYOD scenario if you don't have a laptop when you're in the office, but maybe you want to access resources when you're at home? Am I going to allow for that or not? Conditional access measures may require that, hey, it has to be a device that we know about, allowing you in to access company resources. But if it's not, if it's a BYOD, we don't allow for that, or here's our policy kind of thing, whatever. So, but you're right. I mean, you don't always need, honestly, I'm looking at it all in one here that's around the corner. It's when I'm home, it's such a huge screen, so much real estate. I love using it. But I just need to bring it into this one workspace that I have, because, like I said, the screen is usable. It actually, built-in webcam, that type of thing. It's an LG all-in-one, and right now I've got two monitors, which is fine. But that user experience, I'm not going to pick that up and take it with me when I travel, obviously. But if that's all I need to do my job, and it's a fantastic user experience, I mean, you're right. I mean, use a laptop when you need it.
And Chris, I know you are a power user. You probably need a Windows laptop. You really do. But a lot of people don't. And a lot of people don't need the high-end PCs that sit on it. And I think what's going to happen is as the economy comes and goes, which it always does, there's going to be harder conversations to be had around saving money and how to reduce the attack vector all at the same point, and e-waste reduction. All right, the next one says flagging underutilization. Help us understand how people, first of all, need to be aware of that. Number two, how they can measure it, and then what the results could be.
Yeah. Well, I think we're talking about these software audits, right? You buy software licensing. Oftentimes that's where can it be installed. And when folks do these license audits, right? How many instances have been using? Is it actually being used? It's very often that, goodness gracious, we don't actually need that many installed versions of the software. We could actually leverage the mobile version, or just a cloud-based version in and of itself, if a company has that type of breakdown of their licensing. And so one of the things that we've done is we've moved our license components to the cloud, and from there we can actually see, are the licenses being consumed? Customer can see that too. But it allows us, to have some visibility there. And but there's also that tremendous flexibility that, hey, we can move these over to other devices for different reasons. Because a new set of users occur, maybe it's a merger occurs, and we have a tremendous use case scenario over there, and we'll just move those licenses over there. And so I think having that visibility of knowing where those licenses are being used and consumed. Oftentimes, I think from the Citrix perspective, right, the concurrent licensing, you should be able to know for sure if those licenses are being consumed or not. And I know you work with a lot of different software vendors. I'm sure that they have some way of checking to see, hey, that 500 set of licenses, are they being used or not? Anyways, but that type of asset management platform to be able to audit and track that is key.
And without a doubt, okay, my answer: ServiceNow. ServiceNow, get ServiceNow in place. So
Sure.
you can see what all your different products are doing in one pane of glass and one dashboard to figure out what you're using. Um, I don't think enough companies have a handle on that. In fact, I know most don't have a handle on that. All right,
Yeah.
the last section Simon brings up here is a leaner blueprints.
Yeah, I think it, it kind of just reiterates. I mean, just we hear a lot of this. We've talked about it before, just sort of cloud first. Um, I think about, I mean, the companies that I've worked with in the last, 20 years roughly combined, um, on-prem kind of solutions is where things started, and then shifting to cloud-based versions of that. And so, um, yeah, in that thinking, oftentimes, built for the traditional method of what's out there. What do we deliver? What do we install on? But as the world of virtualization and now the cloud has emerged, it's really begun to rethink like, hey, that IT spend, what do we really need on the endpoint? And not just that, but what are the capabilities when we're on there? And so, um, he's basically emphasizing the fact that, rather than, go off in the traditional buy hardware that doesn't have really much of a return on your investment there, uh, um, if you're going to be leveraging these cloud-based or VDI platforms to deliver these applications, um, you know, um, IGEL can bring a clear ROI by leveraging the equipment you have in your inventory. Um, uh, Putting it on there, putting our OS on there under management with just enough OS and just what the customer needs, and always the ability to add more as use cases change. So again, it's really just, fully understanding what options you have when IGEL is in your back pocket. There's much more, and you guys know this very well as a partner, when the customers that you've worked with. So.
Yeah, Chris, I think what we're really highlighting here is having that more well thought out blueprint that includes a massive dose of deliver, not deploy, includes and could be actually led by the conversation at the endpoint.
Yeah, I mean, we've done many of these things before, and I've heard you go in and talk to customers about what's your endpoint strategy, or various ways of asking the same
So let
thing.
me let me
Yeah.
let me comment on that real quick. I love where you're going
Mhm.
with it. I walk in and say, "What's your digital workspace strategy?"
Yeah, there you go.
And there's no real answer. Okay, what's your end user compute strategy? No real answer there. And then finally, I'm like, okay, what is your endpoint strategy? I mean, surely you got an endpoint, and most people don't have an endpoint strategy. I was listening to a podcast over the weekend talking about these new neural CPUs, where they're going to take the power of processing at the edge as it relates to AI, and they're going to put the power of the processing at the edge. Because if you stop and think about it, the most computing power on the planet is at the edge, I'm sorry, at the edge, not in the middle, not in the data center. It's at the edge if you aggregate it all together. And guess what? The only people who figure that out are the bad guys.
Yeah, if you look at what gets hit with ransomware, what are they generally trying to attack? The low-hanging fruit, the
Yeah.
endpoint. And I see a lot of these joint solution type things going out there. The antivirus, the mitigation type solutions, or the be able to recover, all of that built for the status quo of generally Windows on that endpoint. Um, and uh, and if you just put IGEL on there from just in and of itself, not really much to even configured, you're already in a much more favorable position from a security perspective, and much less of an attack vector, and you can always tighten it down to your liking. So starting there, and then what am I going to get to? I'm going to get to a digital workspace delivered through X, Y, or Z. So, um, but that's certainly the approach that IGEL certainly promotes quite a bit, and there's a ton of x86 64-bit devices out there existing or new that can bring and deliver that for customers. So.
Okay, the whole point here is just challenge it. I mean, just because we always have doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. We live in a different world. There's a different environment, different economy, different security posture that needs to be had. At least for some segment of your user population, don't just give them a Windows anything. Give them something that is right sized and leaner and more secure. Can't just keep doing it the old way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Chris, that gets us to the end of that blog, and thank you to Simon for writing that. It really does align with what people need to be thinking about.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate your partnership and leadership and challenging the way people have been doing things. And so thank you for that.
The truth is, Chris, I get up every day and I have a moment of, man, I just want to be done. And then I have 5 minutes later, it's like I can't wait to go attack it again.
Yeah. Well, I think we've all been there. Certainly,
yeah.
I have definitely woken up and be like, I'm ready to crush the day. And sometimes that doesn't have the same feeling, but then a text, a call, an email, whatever, something, and next thing you know, you're excited to go solve problems in the world. So, anyways, well,
All right, Chris,
appreciate your time, brother friend.
Yep, we'll do it again in 2 weeks. Thank you.
All right, take care.